Welcome and welcome back to my channel Boomsby Beauty. If you are new to my channel, my name is Juliana. In today's video, I'm going to be ranking all the palettes I used in January and late December. I want this to be a regular thing on my channel. So I'm going to be ranking January and December now. And for the next episode, it's going to be ranking all the palettes I used in February. Alright, before we get into the video, let's talk about what's on my eyes. So on my eyes is a self-curated palette. This is a palette that I put together myself. So they are individual shades from different brands. Details of these are on my Instagram, and that's what I have on my eyes today. I'm going to be talking about 10 palettes. I mean, not to say that that's the 10 palettes I used in January and December, but they are my top 10. And that's what I'm going to be sticking with. In 10th place are the Stack Them Up palette from P. Louise. So I kind of bought this together, and I think they were released together at the same time. They've got like different color theme, and I'm going to rank them in the same position because I kind of used them together for the same look. So this is this Money Tones, I believe that's the name. So this is this Money Tones. It's mainly a pink palette, and that's one of the palettes I use. And I'm hoping that as I'm speaking, I'm showing you the look I use the palette with as well, just so you can see, you know, where the palette kind of plays a role in the looks. I mainly use this palette for blending because it was such a mixture of pinks and purples. I had to get the right blend, so sometimes you have to dig into different palettes just to get the right shade or the right blend. And this is the Turquoise Chip, so this is a blue, so I would have dipped in one blue or the other in the palette. And then lastly, the COOOO, whatever the name is. This is actually the palette that is making me rank it in number 10, and it was mainly because of this purple here. This purple was not as blendable as, for example, the purple in our Watch the Queen Conquer palette, and that's why it's number 10. I mean, technically, all of these palettes I'm showing you, some other time when I use them, if I use shades that really pop, you know, more than my previous experience, they could come up higher in my ranking, but that's hardly going to happen because I use a lot of palettes for different looks, and I've got quite a few. So I'll be very surprised if I kind of use this in a look I'm featuring on my YouTube, possibly personally. But if I do get a different experience of any of this palette, then I will feature them and I will tell you how I use them differently, or what shade kind of made me change my mind about the palette. So these three are number 10 in my ranking. Alright, in 9th place is the Viseart Petite Paris Etoile palette, and this was a joy to use. I've only used 2 shades so far. If you've seen my Cool Tones video, I used these 2 shades here and they were beautiful. They blended like a dream. The only reasons that number 9 is because I've only used 2 shades so far, and also Cool Tones will not be my first choice. So for me, even if I haven't used it, it's not really right now coming higher in my rankings, but I plan to use this over again, so I will let you know how the other shades perform and whether it's going to go higher up in my ranking. In 8th place is the Playing in Makeup by Yolando Expression palette. So this is one of our Infinity collection. This is the palette called Expression. This palette was a dream to use. It was a dream to use. The only reason it's not higher up is because I would have preferred a darker shade, and when I used the palette, I had to dig into one of my Blend Bunny palettes. I had to dig into the black to darken my outer corner. That is the only reason it's coming in at that position. But as far as the other shades go, especially the shimmers, oh my days, absolutely beautiful. I mean, look at that. For this palette to even come up in my first 10 alone, it means it really stood out for me. I mean, during the months I'm ranking them, because I mean, they are, like I said, there are others I'm not even placing in this ranking. So this is in the 8th place, but it is gorgeous. I'm going to try and not swatch everything, but this is a beautiful duochrome. That's the shape. I'm hoping that you can see that shift of blue and purple. Absolutely gorgeous. Ranking in at number 7 is another palette from Playing in Makeup by Yolando, and this is the Upward palette. Again, another one of the Infinity. In fact, they are all just gorgeous, but this is number 7 for me, and the reason being, I've used this purple and I've used these 2 in the middle during the week, but that's as far as I've used the palette. I can just see all of some of this Infinity palettes popping in all around the years because they are all gorgeous. I'm telling you, honestly, if you don't have one, you need to get your hands on at least one. Just find a color story that suits you and pick one of them. And she's often in, nowadays she has a lot of sales. I mean, the last one she has just finished about 3 days ago, 40%. That's a lot. So talking about this palette, this is gorgeous. So with all our palettes, I've never found any of our palette that I have any issues with blendability. So it's a case of color story, you know, and some pigmentation might be more intense than the other, but that's as far far as it goes, and possibly maybe the choices of shimmers as well, because for me shimmer matters. So whenever I get one of our palettes that I love the shimmers, it's always going to come up higher. So this is the shimmer I used in the look I created with this palette. And that's what it swatches like. I'm most likely going to be swatching all the shimmers in this palette because they are just so beautiful, honestly. Yeah, so that is number 7, the Upward palette from Pimbe. In 6th place is the It's Freaking Bats palette, which again I use for my cool tone look. Now, the reason why this palette is coming in at number 6 and possibly even not backwards is because of the shimmers. I think for me, the shimmers made up for the only matte I used in this shade. I used one matte in my look and it's this one. And I have to say I had to slightly change the way I would have used a matte for this shade, because it was almost not wanting to kind of stick to the primer, so I had to like use a different method basically. So it's not one of those mattes that you can like blend and over blend, because now it wouldn't stay in place. It's literally you have to gently stamp it, you know, stamp it onto the primer for it to stay in place. But the shimmers, oh my word, they are another thing entirely. So that is why it's higher, because I just love shimmers. I love shimmers. I think you can even use shimmers to cover, you know, matte that is not performing well. So for me, that's always a priority, not the matte in the palette. Obviously, when I find a palette with good mattes, I love it, like the Blend Bunny, either the Swatch palette or the Blends palette. They are just beautiful. Given the circumstances where in a palette all the shades are not made equally, as long as the shimmers perform outstandingly, for me, yeah, I would still love that palette basically. I mean, if you are contemplating buying this palette and you are not sure whether it's because of what somebody said or somebody's experience on the matte, these shimmers, they more than make up for anything in this palette. And I'm hoping it's just that periwinkle matte that is problematic. I haven't used the other matte like I said, but these are the shimmers I use and they are beautiful. I think possibly even all the 3 are duochromes, but they are just yummy. If I used any of this palette in a YouTube video, I'm going to link it to this particular video, or I mean the pictures you will see in the video, and all those pictures are on my Instagram page as well. But these shimmers were definitely a joy to use. Yeah, so the Freaking Bat palette is number 6 in my ranking for this month. Alright, in 5th place is another Pimbe Infinity palette, and this is Unexpected. Yeah, it's a cool tone palette, but this palette is it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. If you love cool tones, you're gonna love this palette. Especially this matte, it took me by surprise. This matte, I used it in my look, and the pigmentation on this grayish silvery matte shade, I was just shocked. Honestly, look at that. Look at that. What is that? That is just gorgeous. Honestly, I really enjoyed using this palette. Oh, and let's talk about the 2 shimmers in this palette, especially this one, this silver one. Oh my days, look at that. Look at that. I would love to use this palette, just this one palette in a look. I'm looking forward to that, and it's a definite possibility because it's got the purple shade I can use to darken my outer edge, and even if I want a little bit of black, I can use the this shimmery black. I mean, in your outer corner you don't really have to stick to matte, you can have a shimmer look. So this palette is enough for me to create a whole look. So for that reason alone, you know, I just love this palette. I really love it, despite the fact that it's a cool tone one. Is so beautiful. It performs outstandingly, and that performance is why it's number 5 in my ranking. And the palette I'm ranking in the 4th place is the Mcgrath Utopian palette. This is Mothership 9. When this palette came out, I ranted, I raved. I was just so upset as to why she just could not give us a colorful palette. So I really didn't want to get the palette until she had like a really good sale, and that's when I got the palette, because I just couldn't justify, you know, getting it at a normal price, or even at the 10% she does when she releases her price. But this palette, I have to say, even though I don't regret not buying it at the launch date, I have to say I take some of my words back, because this palette is gorgeous, especially these 4 special shades here. For my look, I used these 2 glittery shades here, and they are gorgeous. This one is actually very glittery. So the way I used this was, I used it with a mixing medium. So I put a mixing medium in my mixer. I have like a palette, kind of a plain palette where I can mix things. So I drop my mixing medium, touch my brush a little to the mixing medium, and then picked up this shade, oh my word, it was like an explosion of shimmery goodness. It was beautiful, beautiful. Oh, it was really beautiful. I mean, the look I created with this palette was what actually initiated me doing close-up eye looks, and the reason was because you couldn't see the intensity of the beauty and glitteriness of the shade unless you really come close. So I did a close-up look. You can have a look on my Instagram. It was just beautiful. This shade is outstanding, but when you swatch it ordinarily, for whatever reason, because it's very dry, you don't see the beauty of this shade until you actually mix it with something. I mean, look at that. It's really dry, but mixed with a mixing medium, oh, absolutely beautiful. And the shade I used as well, that one is actually very light, so the magic doesn't come out until you use something with it. And now I understand why she came out with the intensity wand when she released this palette, because you definitely need something else to make this sparkle come alive. I don't know why that is, why she can't just make them sparkling from the word go. Maybe that's what the formula takes, I don't know. But for whatever the reason, don't write this palette off or these shades off until you try this method of mixing it with something else, and honestly you will see the magic come out. But as far as my ranking goes, Mothership 9 is number 4 in my ranking. Moving on with the ranking, in the third place is BH Cosmetics Miss Gloss Delete List palette, which is all messed up because of the material of the palette. But this is the inside of the palette. I mean, I did a video on this. You've heard me talk about this palette. This palette is gorgeous. This palette is gorgeous. I don't know what they've done. I'm really hoping it's going to be a very easy palette to deport. I really don't like the size of the palette, and I would really like to pop the shades out. But this palette is beautiful. Both the mattes, both the shimmers. I'm not going to swatch anything because I did do a dedicated video on this. This row here, let's ignore the glitter, but this row and all of the shimmers in this palette are just beautiful. They are really beautiful. I don't know if the palette is still on their website, but it was one of the palettes I used in December and January, and I just had to rank it. I had to talk about it. So if you have this palette sitting somewhere and you haven't used it, then dig it out and use it. Yeah, so the BH Cosmetics Little List palette is number 3 in my ranking. And in second place is the Watch the Queen Conquer palette. This palette was a joy to use. It was such a joy to use to the point that I never put any shimmer on my lid. This palette is beautiful. I have a video using this palette on my channel, and in that video I did a mainly matte look with shimmer in my inner corner and kind of like pulling it across my crease. I've used the palette outside of YouTube, but yeah, this palette is beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's just so beautiful. It's a two-tone palette if you've not seen it. If you haven't seen it, I don't know where you've been, but yeah, this is the palette, and I think it's currently even on sale on our website. It's just an absolutely beautiful palette. The ranges of color in this palette is what I like. I mean, look at this. It's like the oranges, the yellows, the greens, and then it gives you like the grungy version of each color on one side, and same thing on this side as well. Now in our stack palette, when I mentioned the purple not blending, the reason why I had to put that at number 10 is because the purple in this one, it was a dream to use. I've never seen a purple blend that well. Honestly, I had no problems using any of the mattes in this palette. It's an absolutely beautifully created palette. I just couldn't believe the blendability in this palette and the range. I mean, look at this. These are all purples, but they are different purple tone in one palette. That was just so gorgeous when I was using this palette. I mean, look at that. Look at your range, you know, purple, pink. It just kind of, oh, it's just a beautiful palette. It's just a beautiful palette. Let's forget the packaging. It's just a beautiful palette, and so it definitely had to come in at number 2 in my ranking. Okay, in the top spot and coming in at number 1 in my ranking of all the palettes I used in December and January is the Relentless palette from Plain in Makeup by Yolando. Oh my gosh, this palette, absolutely beautiful. I've done a pink look with it. I've done a blue and pink look with it. It's just yummy. I posted this palette on my Instagram as well. For me, when I post a palette on my Instagram, is because it's just an awesome palette. It's not just any other palette, because mostly nowadays I like to post single shades, like when I make a palette or my easier to arrange palette. Those are what I like to post on my Instagram these days. So if I post a pre-made palette on my Instagram, it's because it's really a beautiful and awesome palette, and this is this is. All the matte shades that I've used in this palette, they are so pigmented, as in crazy pigmentation and beautiful blending. Honestly, the blendability, you wouldn't think a pigmented palette could blend so well, but these does. Honestly, these does. The only thing I would change is the size of the palette. From Pimbi's history, most of our palettes are big palettes, so you have to get used to it. This is why I appreciate the Infinity palette so much, giving us, you know, 5 shades, you know, that are just beautiful. What would have made those Infinity palettes perfect is if you could pop them out and kind of mix them with each other rather than them just being fixed in the palette. If you could pop them, oh my, that is it. That is it. They would have been perfect without any question. The Relentless palette is also got 3 duochrome. So these 3 shades here, they are duochrome shades, and look at the size of the shades. It's just so perfect. I mean, for something that you like in a palette to be the most in the palette is so beautiful. Now let's look at the shade when I point it to you, but when I turn it to the side, what can you see? I'm really hoping you can see the shift in this palette. Honestly, it is gorgeous. And these are the 3 of them swatched. I'm gonna try and put them on my palm, just in the hope that you'll be able to see the shift better than if I put them on the back of my hand. But these are the shades swatched. Absolutely yummy. And also swatching them on the back of my hand. Oh wow, those are yummy. They are so beautiful. Look at my hand again. Just pure beauty, you know, the glitteriness and shininess. Honestly, I think definitely Playing a Makeup by Yolando, the brand, is really on a roll this year. So that was my ranking. I enjoyed all those palettes. Yeah, and they were my top 10. They were my top 10. I mean, obviously I counted the stack palettes together because, I mean, they came together. But those were the top palettes I used in December/January. So let me know what you think about this monthly ranking of all the palettes I used on a month-to-month basis. Let me know what you think. But that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you've enjoyed this video and you've enjoyed hanging out with me. If you are not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you on this platform. If you have enjoyed this video, please like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. And until next time, I'll see you. Bye.